Man, for thousands of years, have been asking themselves the existential question, who am I? What's life? Every person, at some point in their life, will ask themselves this question. Sometimes the question comes in the toughest of times. Sometimes this question comes in the best of times. 100 years ago, 150 years ago, when life was difficult and people really had to survive, a person got up in the morning, he had no questions about himself, about his identity. He had one question: what am I going to eat? How am I going to get the firewood to warm up the house? When people were busy with survival, they didn't think about the meaning of life. Now, there's much more depression, certainly much more visitation to psychiatrists and psychologists about happiness and what is my life worth? What am I doing here? So this question can come at different times. When people are looking into themselves, deeper into themselves, about what is life. There were books written and even on bestseller lists, written by people in the last year of their life. They had a disease that they would succumb to. And they write that those last months of their life were the most significant, the deepest, and they learned what life really is about in those last months. Because they asked the existential question, what am I? What is life? Who am I? The secularist will never find an answer to this question. Because the secularist, when he digs deep, what is he going to find? He'll find an emptiness and no answer, a darkness, blank. Their Eastern religions, they speak about inner peace. So you have to block everything out, all sensation, and you have to sit in one position and meditate, and you'll find inner peace. Nothing's going on. Inner peace. But what is peace? Peace is no war. So that's what it's all about. There's no war, no tension, no stress. That's what it's not. What is it? What is it? In the 19th chapter of Tanya, he's going to tell us that the essence, our essence, is the neshama. And what's a neshama? Fire, a flame that God lit. So let's start Perek Yutes, the 19th chapter. And over here, he starts Ulataisa's beer for additional explanation, elaboration upon the concept that he spoke about in the previous chapter, the hidden love or the subconscious love that all of us have for Hashem. There's a subconscious love, it's hidden. It's not necessarily felt in our mind or in our heart. That's why it's called misuteres, it's hidden and subconscious. And he explained that comes from an Oir Hashem, God's light that he put into us. And that is our instinct to love Hashem to the degree that one would give up his life to stay connected with Hashem, for Hashem. Now he's going to explain it deeper. Specifically, what is the nature? Like he asked in the beginning of the 18th chapter, what is inyana? What is the nature and the dynamics and the purpose? How it functions? How does this hidden love, spiritual love, the love of the neshama, how exactly does it function? What are its dynamic? And where it comes from? And he's going to explain it. That's the additional explanation that he's going to elaborate over here. The nature of this instinct that connects us to Hashem. And the nature of this instinct that all of us are ready to give up their life for Hashem. To explain this, we first must explain Mashakasav, a verse in Mishlei, Ner Hashem Nishmasod. The verse says, Ner Hashem Nishmasod. The soul of man, our neshama, is God's lamp. A lamp is it has oil and a wick and a fire, and it sheds light and illuminates a room. So Hashem lit lamps. On Hanukkah we light Ner is Hanukkah. Friday night we light Ner is Shabbos. And here, Ner Hashem, the lamp of Hashem. Hashem lights candles. Hashem lights lamps. And that is us. Each one of us is a lamp. Has a flame, has a light. So what does that mean? The Kabbalistic meaning of this verse is not just that we have a mission that Hashem set us up to light up the world. That's true as well. But the Kabbalah, Chassidus, explain this in a deeper way. Pirish sheYisrael haKolim Adam nishmasim milamashal kol haner. It's a description of the neshama. The neshama is like a flame. What is the nature of a flame? And he's going to explain the way it's understood in Kabbalah and also in earlier secular literature. The nature of the flame, we have two things, two qualities. On one end, the flame is going upwards and it's shaking, it's wavering. And it is, on one hand, being driven upwards, but it's being held back by the wick. As long as there's wick and oil, it's going to be down here. As soon as there's no more oil in the lamp, no more flame. So the way this was understood is, it's shaking and waving to go upwards. That's its nature. Why? So the Kabbalah says that there is the source of fire is above. There's a certain spiritual source of fire. So the fire is a flame burning. This has its source above. It's in a physical time, like a gas type of source that you cannot see, but up there it is this. That's where the source of fire. It's not in the form of a physical flame, and that's why the flame is headed upwards, but it's held on down below because the flame's nature is to burn to stay here as long as there is fire. The nature of the flame is to go up above. That's why it's drawn above. It's being held back. There's tension. On one hand, it's heading upwards. It's the only thing that's heading upwards. Water you put on the table is going to come down. Anything, if it comes down. Fire goes up. That's because its source is above. But it's held down, so there's tension. That's why it's waving. So even though if it goes above and it will cease to be held back by the wick and the oil, it'll cease to exist. That's its nature. Its nature is to go upwards and become one with its source. So there's here, on one hand it's here, but it wants to become absorbed in its source. That's why the flame goes upwards. Now, when it becomes absorbed in its source, it'll cease to exist. So it's more important, and the nature for the flame to become included in the source, although it's no longer going to be a physical flame, but that is really its drive and its motive, rather than be here in a physical form. So this dynamic of a physical flame, that is the meaning of that Hashem's, the neshama is like a flame. The neshama is like a flame, and in a way even more than that, because the neshama is down here below. It's in the physical body, but really its direction and its desire is to go upwards and to get out of the body. The neshama really doesn't want to be part of the body. The neshama wants to be part of Hashem. And even though if it'll become included in Hashem, it will cease to exist as an independent being. So it'd rather be united with Hashem and lose its individual identity than to be down here below. That is its nature. Afa became bekacha chavetz b'tivai. Kach nishmas ha'adam came b'chinas ruch nefesh chfeitza v'chasheka b'tiva liparid v'latzis min hagov li'david b'sharsha. By its nature, it wants to disconnect from the body, and it wants to connect with Hashem. So and that's the tension that's in the neshama. It wants to connect with Hashem in the source, in its life source. Hagam shetiya ayin ve'efes v'tizbatel shema metzias legamri. Even though the neshama, if it becomes included in Hashem, it will cease to exist as an independent being. It'll go back to its original source, being part of Hashem. So it's going to lose identity. So what interest, what motive, what gain does it have by leaving the body and connecting with Hashem? That is its nature. Nothing will be left from the original neshama. It'll become one with Hashem. So it doesn't have any gain, any motive for that. That is its nature. And that's why, just like the neshama waves, just like a flame waves, so to the neshama, the waving is, on one hand it's here, and on the other hand it wants to go above. I know someone, today he's about Shuvah, and he left all this Mishigas, so it was very far from Yiddishkeit. Actually came from a Russian Jewish home, but he was very far from traditional, or any form of Yiddishkeit, and he was searching and looking for meaning in life. He ended up by the Buddhists, and he's there with a Buddhist, And he describes how he's sitting on the floor in the position, and they're meditating. And he's, sitting and meditating. I tell you, you have to meditate. And he sees over there, they were there together, a whole group of people. And he notices one guy is meditating, he's shuckling. He's shaking. He's trying to figure out why is he shaking. That must be a Jew. And he goes over to him and says, yeah, he's Jewish. So why were you shaking? He says, all Jews, the way if he sees, he's been around different places with the Buddhists, if it's a Jew, he's shaking. And in our literature it says, why do we shake by davening? When we daven, why do we shake? We shake by davening because we're a flame. And a flame is shaking. It's wavering. But what is the meaning of that? The meaning is that because the waving is, there's tension between what the neshama wants and what is its drive and where it's at. So it's at this world, but it's really clinging for something higher. So that is really the essence of the neshama. What am I? What is my essence? What is the deepest unconscious of the neshama of a person? It's his neshama. It's not an emptiness. It's not a meaningless inner peace. It's not an inner peace in the sense that I have no tension and no problems and I'm not hungry. It's an inner connection. It's the connection with Hashem. And when a Yid connects with Hashem down in this world, that's the way he fulfills and satisfies that thirst that the flame wants to go up. So when a Yid does Torah mitzvahs, it's as if he's connected to Hashem and one with Hashem. And that is the way to satisfy that inner sense, that inner dynamic that a Yid has. A Yid has something inside. And when a person asks himself, so what is the meaning of life? What is the purpose of life? Why is he asking these questions? Why are we asking these existential questions? A person, he's not hungry, he just ate. He's not needy because he made his money. And yet he feels something inside of him that he feels that there's something there that he hasn't touched. There's something there that he can't identify. And that is the neshama. It's a flame, and it's a love, and it's a connection that the neshama feels and wants to connect with Hashem. Now, what is the nature of this? So he says, he uses the word, by its nature it wants to cling to Hashem, betivo. Now, what is the nature of something? You have scientists studying nature, and they give reasons and explanations why this is like this, and why that is like that, and it needs for this reason, it needs to survive, and it has to come and it has to go. So we call that teva, nature. So the Alter Rebbe says, really, teva means something that's fixed and sunk into its place. It's not because of a reason. Hashem put it there, whether it's nature, in the natural world, or in our psychology, and in our spiritual dynamics. it doesn't have an explanation. V'teva zehu shem hamushal l'chol davar she'einu b'chinas tamadas. This is not something that is intellectual. It's not something that is rational. It's an instinct. An instinct, it's an instinct. You can't explain an instinct. Some animals, for the mother animal, even a mother animal, for their child will take great risks. A human as well. But a human has more intellectual mind. Why will an animal take great risks? Because it's an instinct. They're not making calculations over here. There's an instinct, there's a mother instinct. The neshama has an instinct that connects it to Hashem. And that's why if you want to analyze why would the neshama want to disconnect and cease to exist, if you're going to want to understand rationally why is the neshama wants to become one with Hashem, even though it will cease to exist, it won't have its identity. So if you're going to make a mathematical calculation, it doesn't pay for the neshama to become one with Hashem. Yes, it will become one with Hashem, but it won't become one with Hashem. It will cease to exist. The neshama that will cease to exist, and then those sparks of godliness will be included with Hashem. So where's the logic here? Where's the gain? There's no gain for the neshama in it. It's not that it's going to be in the close to the glory of Hashem. It'll be a bigger neshama, a better neshama. That's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about Olam Haba, where in the future we are promised that Yidden are going to bask in the glory of Hashem's radiance. So there's going to be a stage of reward for all of our mitzvahs, spiritual reward. Or a person after his passing, his neshama goes up to heaven. We're not talking about that here. Really, the dynamic of the neshama is a drive to unify with Hashem and lose its own existence and unity and identity and being. So that's why he says it's a nature, it's a natural instinct, because it is not logical. And this is very important. He's getting to something that's very important in the whole portrayal of our nature, the nature of a Yid. Remember that a Yid is ready to give up his life for Hashem. Where does this come from? This idea that a Yid is ready to give up his life for Hashem. That means he's not going to be alive anymore. Why? Because of this ideal, altruism, that a person's ready to give up his life. So the Alter Rebbe's point over here is that it is not something that is for a greater glory, that it's not something for a greater pleasure. That this dynamic that a Yid is so strongly connected with Hashem that he would give up his life for that is an instinct. And therefore it's not because of any calculation. Because if it would be a calculation or a benefit, then he wouldn't want to surrender himself if he loses himself completely. The math doesn't work. If I am an I, why would I? So therefore, I would want to be a bigger I, a greater I, have greater closest to Hashem. Hashem is the biggest, the I of all I's, capital I. And now that I am close to Hashem, so I am more. So that would make sense. But if we're saying here, that really what's behind this idea that a Yid is ready to give up his life for Hashem is really surrendering himself so completely that he's no longer an I. Why is he doing it? It doesn't make sense. So he's saying, the Kabbalah says, it's an instinct. Just like a flame is headed upwards, and by its nature it would want to disconnect from the wick. So through to the neshama, by its nature, wants to cling and be one with Hashem. Not for any rational reason, it's a super rational reason, a super rational drive. V'gam kan hakavana sheratzon v'chayfet zeh b'nefesh ein b'chinas tam v'das v'seichel musik v'muvim. This drive is not logical and rational. El lamayla mehadas. It's beyond understanding v'seichel musik v'muvim. V'hi b'chinas chachma sheb'nefesh shebo ein Sof Baruch Hu. This is coming from the chachma, the b'chinas chachma, the highest point of the structure, the beginning of this human structure, the neshama structure is wisdom, b'chinas chachma, what the Kabbalah calls chachma, and in it is the light of Hashem. So that is the light of Hashem that's in him. Like we said, the flame, that is godly. So godly, that flame resides in chachma. Because chachma is, so to say, where heaven connects to earth, where the flame of Hashem touches the neshama of a person. And that godliness in him wants to go back to its source, even though the identity and being will cease to exist. And that is the source of the concept of Mesiras Nefesh, the Jewish concept of sacrificing one life. Now, of course, the argument can be made that you do find others who give up their life for an ideal. You have soldiers who are fighting for their country or fighting for their king, who give up their life for their country. So they're giving up their life for their country, and they're ready to do that. Or people are giving up their life to save other people. Altruism. How is that different than what we're speaking over here, this Jewish instinct to give up your life for Hashem? How is this different? So what he's saying here is that it is beyond our understanding, that it's an instinct, that is, it's a different type of chemistry, so to say. It's a different type of dynamic. How so? When a soldier sacrifices life for his country, there's a certain principle and there is a logic to it. There's benefit for it. He is part of this country, and it's very important for him, for this country to survive. There's an intelligent decision made in his mind. Soldiers are fighting for their country, for their family, for their people, for their identity, for freedom. And you give up your life, like there was an American patriot who said, give me liberty or give me death. So he worshipped liberty. He believed in liberty. That if there's no liberty, it's not worth living. So there's life. So what's liberty? Liberty is the higher form of life. And a life, it's worth giving up the life of being a slave than for the life of liberty, it's give up a life of slavery. So there's a calculation over here. Without liberty, life is worth less. With liberty, life is worth more. Or a soldier makes a calculation. I am one individual. Then there's a country. And then there's family. And then I'm fighting for a cause. That cause is also life. And I'm being part of something bigger than me by giving my life for my country. Then there's the glory. Or you hear about the Muslims with their virgins. So it's not that they are sacrificing their life. They're not sacrificing. They're sacrificing their life in this world with their belief they're going to have a better life over there. There's no sacrifice. There's no sacrifice here. It's an exchange. It's a trade-off. Trade-off life over here with a life up there with pleasure. A trade-off of a life of slavery for a life of liberty. The idea of Mesiras Nefesh is not because of any calculation. It's not because it's going to be better. It's not because I'm going to have greater glory or there's going to be great reward. If someone's giving up his life for Hashem because he's going to be rewarded in the world to come, that is not the real absolute Mesiras Nefesh that we're talking about over here. Here we're talking about an instinct that's without a calculation. That a Yid is giving himself up to Hashem, to be one with Hashem, not because he is still going to exist. Not I'm going to be one with Hashem. This giving up his life for Hashem is a reflection of a deeper connection that the neshama is ready to give itself up to and become one with Hashem, even if it loses its total identity. The Hasidim would speak about Socrates. Even though Hasidim didn't really read Greek philosophy, but somehow the story of Socrates got to the Hasidim. And Socrates was a famous Greek philosopher, one of the fathers of Greek philosophy, and he preached to Greeks, to a government that really saw him as a revolutionary. And they told him that either he changes his views, preaches differently, or he has to give up his life. And he chose life over his, he sacrificed his life for his philosophy, for his ideals. So the story goes, what happened with Socrates when he went up in heaven? What happened? So he comes up to heaven, and there's the expectation he sacrificed his life for his ideals. So they asked him up there, Socrates, what do you expect? He says, I expect to be together with Avram. Avram gave his life for his ideals, and I gave my life for ideals. I want to be in the company of Abraham. I read about Avram. So they look at him and they say to him, Socrates, you believe in your ideals. You love your ideals. Life to you without your philosophy is not life. So you didn't really surrender. You made a trade-off. You exchanged the pleasure of philosophy without philosophy, and you're expecting now to be living a life of souls where you're going to have this philosophy up there. So you traded your philosophy down in this world for the expectation of a spiritual, philosophical existence up there. So you exchange worldly pleasure for heavenly pleasure. You exchange worldly glory for heavenly glory. Avram made no calculations. He wasn't counting on miracles. Hashem said this, and I'm going to do it. Whether it's personal sacrifice or the sacrifice of Yitzchak, the Akedah. In fact, the Rebbe once spoke about this. He said, the test of the Akedah, no one knew about. Avram was told by Hashem, take Yitzchak and sacrifice him. No one would glorify Avram for it. No one would know about it. It's totally giving oneself up for Hashem. His dreams, his history, his glory for Hashem. It's not that it was a trade-off. He's expecting that if I'm going to do Hashem's will and sacrifice Yitzchak, I'm going to get a Yaakov. If I'm going to sacrifice this, Hashem is going to give me another reward. No. He saw this, that Hashem wants me to end it all, so to say. And he did it. And this is a reflection of the dynamic of the neshama to be one with Hashem. And that was expressed throughout the ages by Jews who gave up their life for Hashem. It's an instinct that reflects our deep connection with Hashem that comes from our deepest part of our neshama. And we can't break that connection by serving idols or abandoning belief in God. And where did he say, and he continues now, Tanya, where did this come from? This came from what he called the Kabbalah Chachma, the Pchina of Chachma. What is the Pchina of Chachma? It's the first sphera, literally wisdom, but that's point where the light of Hashem is in us. Now, in the Kabbalah, they connect this Pchina with Kodesh, holiness. And now we're going to have a new understanding of what does it mean, holiness. Generally, the conventional understanding in Gemara and Medrash, what is holiness? Holiness is abstention from the physical, certainly from physical pleasures. So the less you're connected and immersed in physical pleasures, you become holy. Over here is going to tell us that no. Over here is going to tell us that light of Hashem that's in Chokhmah, that's holiness. That holiness is not about disconnecting from the physical, it is more our connecting to the highest levels of Hashem. That is holiness. It's actually a revolutionary thought. It's a very Hasidic thought that emphasizes the positive than the negative. The conventionalist thought, let's negate physicality. Let's negate pleasure, sensuality. Then I'm holy. By what we're not doing. And Chassidus is saying, what is Kedusha? Kedusha is holiness, connecting. That's why the marriage ceremony is called Kiddushin. Kiddushin is a very deep and intimate connection between husband and wife. It's called Kiddushin. And therefore, this connection, the instinct that a neshama, a Yiddish neshama is connected to Hashem and is driven to cling to Hashem, that dveikus, that is holiness. Because that level of Hashem that is above the worlds, that is higher than the worlds, we have the capability of connecting to that level. That's what Kedusha is. Not our separateness from the physical world, but Hashem's highest level where He is separate from all the worldly affairs. And we can connect to that Kedusha, because that Kedusha is P'chinas Chachma, and that is within us, in our neshama. This is the rule, the principle of everything that's connected with Kedusha. Chachma in Kabbalah calls it the higher Kodesh, the higher holiness. And that is where our neshama is striving for Kedusha, that it comes from the P'chinas of Chachma. Now, how do we connect to such a high level? So that is also in the nature of Chachma, that is through submission to Hashem. To surrender oneself to Hashem. So, because this B'chinas HaChacham is Habat L'Metzias B'ay Nisav Baruch HaMlo B'shbay V'ein Adav F'nei Atzvei K'nis K'liyahu V'lachin Nikar Koyach Ma We mentioned in the previous chapter and also in the beginning of Tanya that the B'chinas of Chokhmah is in this deepest level of the soul, where the light of wisdom lies and the light of Hashem lies. And to be able to sense that light, you have to tune into it to the degree that you're surrendering your own selfhood to focus and to get that flash of light. It's called bittul. You have to, so to say, nullify yourself and surrender yourself to tune in, to be an instrument which will capture that spirituality. This is the opposite, the polar opposite of the other side. If you want to know the difference between the side of holiness and the unholy, in the side of holiness, you tune into holiness and you surrender yourself to the holiness. You don't you're not focusing on yourself, how I'm going to bring down holiness to me. It's not about yourself. It's tuning into and becoming part of the music of holiness. Not, okay, what's in it for me? It's not what's in it for me. There's Hashem, I want to tune into this. I want to feel that light. So I forget about myself. The more you forget about yourself, because you're so much focused on spirituality, the more you feel the Kedusha. The light is shining when it's clear. If it's not clear, the light doesn't shine through it. And the less of the sense of your selfhood, the more the light is going to shine. What about the unholy side? The unholy side is self-conscious. And it's motivated by gain. What's in it for me? That's the sign of the unholy. The souls of the Goyim, from the Sitra Achra, it's about what's in it for me. The Avdim L'Gamayu, they may do good, but it's for themselves. Va'amrin hav, these are terms and psukim. Give me. Haliteni, when Esav met Yaakov and he sold the right of the firstborn, what did he say? He says, give me some of those red beans, the porridge. Haliteni, load me up. Feed me. Me. Because the nature of the other side is I'm somebody. Where am I in this? Chachma, the p'chin of wisdom, to really tune in and to capture wisdom, you have to be humble and not focus on what do I think, but focus is what is wisdom telling me? What is the wise one telling me? If it's about what I think, I'm not going to learn. To learn and to receive wisdom, you have to say, okay, what is wisdom telling me? So you have to nullify yourself. You have to put aside your preconceived ideas and be open, but putting yourself and your understanding aside to gain wisdom that is much greater than you. So therefore you have to have humility, you have to be ready to surrender your ego. But this other side, the side of that's not holy, is into their ego. So it's what is in it for me. So they also may do mitzvahs and worship Hashem, but it's what's in it for me. What's in it for me? That's why they are called dead. Anything that's connected with the other side. And the nations that are into this, it's me, that's death. Life is the source of all life is Hashem. If you're connected to Hashem, that's life. If you're not connected to Hashem, it's death. If you want to be recharged, you plug into the wall. And then you get energy. But you have to plug into the wall. So you have to bend down. Usually the plug is below. You have to bend down and plug it in, find the plug. But if you say, no, I'm over here. I want the energy to come over to me. I want the plug to come to me. So you're not, it's a dead battery. It's dead. The phone is dead. The battery is dead. The phone is dead. And these people are dead. So in order to connect to Hashem, you have to be ready to plug in. To plug in and to be a receiver, like they call the receiver of a radio receiver. Because it's not giving its own message. It's just tuned in to receive the message coming from the radio station. That's bittul. It nullifies oneself. It's not my own, it's not about me. It's just to receive. The side that's holy is a receiver. The other side is not. That's why they call the dead. Ki ha-chochma techaya, a verse says. Wisdom is the source of life. Why is wisdom the source of life? Because the wisdom, the Kabbalah says, wisdom comes from humility and surrender of one's ego. That's why there's life. Because if you want to be connected to the source of life, we're talking more spiritual life, the source of life, you have to surrender ego. Death is when there's no wisdom. Similarly is the wicked Jews, the rebellious Jews, before they are tested in a test of faith, so they are disconnected. They're dead spiritually. But even this Jew that's spiritually dead, we found so many of them who gave up their life to Hashem. So how did this happen? They're called dead because they're not connected. Why are they not connected? Because they did so many sins and they're doing so many sins. So apparently they're dead. So if they're dead, how come in a moment where they were tested, so these were Jews who gave up their life or risked their life, like we saw even in our times, Jews who are so far from Yiddishkeit risked their life to help Jews or to help the holy Jews in the Holy Land, and did other things which they risked their lives with. So where did this come from? What's going on here? If they're spiritually dead, where did they suddenly come alive from? So he says, "Ki b'chinas hachachma shebenefesh lekis nitzis alakus ma'ayin sabaruch hamalu b'shba heim b'chinas galus begufam benefesh habahamis." There's no such thing that a yid is completely dead. There's still a battery there that could be recharged. And not only there's a need to recharging from outside of it, there's a battery there that could self-recharge. If you smack it up enough, it's going to come alive. Like a coal that it looks like it's dead, and you blow on it, and you shuffle it, suddenly the flame is going to come up. So these Yidden, and this is an interesting dynamic. The Alter Rebbe was very much into this observation. How is it possible that a Yid who is spiritually dead suddenly is ready to give up his life for Yiddishkeit, for his faith? He will not become a goy. He will not change his faith. How does this work? And that's where we go back to this flame, the hidden love, the Ava Mesuteres, the hidden love. That's where it's from. It's not because of a calculation. It's not because of ideal. It's not because a reward in the other world for pleasures and the greater pleasures in the other world. But what is it? It's part of his instinct. It's part of his spiritual genes that he is connected to Hashem. And even though in his daily life he's practically dead in his daily life, because he still has an ego, and his ego doesn't allow him to tune into Hashem. He's not ready to recharge every day, plugging in with putting on tefillin, plugging in every Shabbos by keeping the Shabbos. He's not ready to receive godly energy by doing mitzvahs, by living the lifestyle. A normal person, a proper Jew, he constantly is recharging. We all have to recharge our batteries. Our phones we have to recharge. We have to recharge our batteries all the time. Right? So same thing, that's why we have mitzvahs, to recharge. But this person is not ready to do that. So practically his phone is dead. The phone with which he calls Hashem is dead. He's disconnected. And suddenly, in a test of faith where he's being smacked up, he says, no. As I said the other time, it could be where actually he's ready to give up his life for Hashem. But there's other people, a lot of the Soviet Union, when the Jews were put down and they just rose to the challenge and they identified themselves as Jews, did something Jewish, even though they knew at this they're risking their life and risking much for it. Where does this come from? And that is the hidden love that's in there. Because that is the spark. So where was it? Where was it? Suddenly it awoke. So therefore he says this is the concept of galus, exile. It was imprisoned. It was exiled. The b'chinas galus begufim b'nefsha b'hamas b'sad haklipa sheb'chol ha'smoli sheb'leiv ha'maleches ha'meshelas begufim b'sad galus ha'shchina kanal. We learn about the galus ha'shchina. That not only are the Jewish people in exile, but kaviyachol, it's as if Hashem himself is in exile. Hashem himself limits himself. Just like when the Jews are in exile, they're tied and bound by the limitations that this general world society is tying them down to, or the culture of Golus is tying them down to, or the Yetzer Hara is tying them down so they cannot really connect to Hashem in with all its glory. So that's Golus of Yidden. It's Golus of Hashem Kaviyachal. Hashem also is, so to say, tied himself as if to limit himself, not to reveal himself in this world. So this is the Golus of his neshama is in Golus, in himself. That's why this is called a hidden love. It's a hidden love. Why is it a hidden love? Ki musuteres mechusa bilvorsak de klipa b'paish Yisrael. This hidden love is, so to say, in a sack. It's covered and imprisoned in a shell of klipa, so it cannot express itself. They're in a shell because of their sins and because of their lifestyle. And as we said before, he used the words, they're dead, so to say. So they're now stuck in this shell until a test of faith comes, which awakens their neshama. But because of that shell, they're, so to say, imprisoned in it. Some Hasidim explain this, that it's like a form of Gilgul. You know, the Kabbalah speaks about the concept of Gilgul, of reincarnation. That means that souls that were here in this world, if they sinned or failed in some other way, they have to come back down. So if it is just if it is if their failing was in a more refined way, they come back in human form. So therefore, in the last lifetime, they were let's say rich, and they didn't give enough tzedakah, so we'll send them back down over here to be poor, to feel needy. And even if they're poor, let's see if they'll give tzedakah, right? So it's a second chance, so. But then the Kabbalah speaks about, the writings of the Arizal have extensive about this, how sometimes the neshama of a person comes down in the form of an animal. So a person was a human being, and the neshama of a human being comes down in a dog. Or the neshama of a human being can come down in a tree. And this is a punishment. If you act in a very animalistic and vulgar way, they'll send him down in a dog. For committing adultery, comes back as a dog. Now, when the neshama is in a dog, there's a lot of suffering there. Why? Because the neshama still has human consciousness. And the neshama is aware that really he is a neshama and not the spirit of a dog. But he cannot express himself because the body of a dog is not a body through which a human can express himself. So he's imprisoned. The neshama is imprisoned in the body of a dog. That's great suffering. And it could be for a certain amount of time, this neshama will be in the body of a dog. So, what is going on over here? The neshama has consciousness. The neshama is an awareness that it's a neshama, and it cannot express this in any way or form. It's imprisoned. To a certain degree, this is the same thing with this person who is so steeped in sin that his body and his grossness is in charge. His animal side is in charge. And because he's acting following his animal instincts and his ego, and he basically tuned himself out completely of his neshama, he's living the life spiritually as a spiritual zombie, as a spiritual deadbeat. So therefore, he can't feel his neshama. And on the contrary, since his animalistic side is in control, so that animalistic side brings him onto him even more sinful thoughts. And that's why foolish thoughts, not rational thoughts. He's not rational. The animal in him is in control. A yid, his chachma, his wisdom, the wisdom of his neshama, which in that wisdom there is the light of Hashem, that is shining in him. So therefore, he's always recharging his batteries, and he's called Chaim. Chaim kulchem hayom. V'achachma techayim. But by this person, he allowed the shell of Klippa to be in charge, and therefore, he is not in control anymore. And it's going to lead him to more sin and more sin. He is in jail until he is shaken up by a test of faith. And this is the whole idea, the Chabad, the Rebbe said this, never give up on a Yid. He calls him The wicked, the Paishi Yisrael, are called dead. The sinners are called dead. And what does he say? These same sinners, if they'll be shaken up, some of them will give up their life for Hashem. What happened? Because there's a hidden love. And the Rebbe taught us this, based on Tanya. When you look at a Yid, don't look at his shell. When you look at a Yid, maybe he's dead spiritually, but he's not completely dead. It's impossible for a Yid to be completely dead. There's always their hidden love. It's hidden and it's covered in a shell, but it's there. So you keep knocking until they open the door. Good night.